Hello creative friends, this is Kathy from Easy Sunday Club. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how I scan and clean up my watercolor art in Photoshop. I'll keep this intro short because this tutorial is going to be a long one. And the reason why I wanted to keep it comprehensive is that I want to give you different options of how I do things in Photoshop, just in case you find one more applicable for your art or your workflow than others. So this by no means means that you need to use all of them, and I'll try to make call out during the demo. No, you don't have to use all of the tricks. This is the art that I'll be using in my demo today, and let's get to it. I hope you find it helpful. First, I'll scan my original work. So I have this original watercolor of a jaguar here. It measures 8 by 10 inches. So it's going to fit in my scanner pretty perfectly. I have an Epson Perfection V600. I'll link it in the video description below. The scanner bed measures about 9 to 12 inches. I know the bigger the scanner bed, the more expensive the scanner is going to be. And this size just kind of fits most of my needs. I'll place it face down. If your painting is smaller than the scanner bed, try to leave some room. Instead of placing it all the way in the corner, I try to place it in the middle so that there's some space all around. Just because there's always going to be a little bit of light pollution from the scanning process, so I want to make sure that the main subject is scanned as perfectly as possible to avoid some of the shadows that are escaping through the scan image. Oh, and make sure you clean the scanner bed surface if you haven't used it in a while. Okay, so now I have the scanner software open and it shows a preview of the jaguar painting. You want to make sure this input image will cover the whole image. So I've set it to 8 by 10 because that's the size of my painting. And over here for advanced setting, again, your input will look a little different, but if you have a relatively new Epson scanner, all the settings should be similar here, as you can see here. Under advanced setting, I should first go to main settings and make sure that the resolution is set to at least 300. I usually set it to 400 just because I will sell art prints that are larger than my originals, like up to 16 by 20 in my case. But if I know I'm going to print this in extra large format or on fabric for whatever reason, then I'll set it to 600, but the file size is going to be huge, so I'll leave it at 400 right now. Scanning quality, I'm going to set it to high. Image type, I'll leave it at 24-bit. Then moving over to advanced settings, I usually try to raise my brightness a little bit just because it helps to reduce the noise of the canvas, the paper itself. It doesn't affect the image that much, so you don't want to set it to like 30 or something. Even 30 doesn't make a huge difference, so I'll set it to 4 or 5 just to clean off the white background. And I'll leave contrast and saturation alone. With this scanner, it doesn't scan in what I like about it doesn't scan in the texture of the cold press paper that much. If you do watercolor, you know that cold press has that rough texture if you look close, and some people complain that when you scan the image, it will come out in the scan image and it's a pain in the butt to clean it, but I've never had that problem, so I'll just leave contrast and saturation alone. One last important thing for image format, I always set it to TIFF because it preserves the image quality the best even after you've edited over and over. And I've already set a destination for my file size. Under folder, you can go to select and select your own file size, but I've set it to folder for all my scanned, original, or raw images. And that's it. We will move on to the digital cleanup part. After scanning, open the image in Photoshop, and I'll walk you through my approach with this file. Most of my watercolor has a main subject or a few subjects and a good amount of white space. So instead of working on the overall adjustments right here, like the brightness, saturation, all of that stuff, I want to make sure that my background is as clean as possible. Whether you have just a little bit of white space or a lot, this step is important, only because through the scanning process and sometimes from painting, there's dust and stains or whatnot that gets caught on the original paper that is being scanned through. I might not be able to see it with my naked eye on screen right now, but oftentimes by the time I printed out the print on a matte sheet of paper, it will show up on the final print, which is annoying and frustrating because I've just wasted a piece of paper. So the first step I will do is to erase the background and replace it with the true white to make sure all of those stains are removed. But before I do that, I'm going to duplicate my layer. Oops. In case I mess up, and hide the background layer here. So we're working off of the new layer. And now I'm going to the eraser tool with the E, or it should be on the left nav here. Right click to select the magic tool. And you'll see that once you select the magic tool, the top nav changes to show the tolerance here, leaving everything else the way it is. I like to keep the tolerance pretty low, and the lower the tolerance, the more sensitive the eraser is to surrounding colors. So if you pick a white, it's not going to pick up anything that's resembling like slightly white, like off-white or cream, versus if you do a high tolerance of 50, you'll see what I mean here, especially around this area. If you click 50 for the background, see it erases everything that looks slightly white that is connected to wherever you're clicking. Even if I do a 30, it erases less, but I lost this area right here. So with watercolor, I'm going for a single digit tolerance so that it's really sensitive. I'll go with a 5. Looks like for 5, it preserved everything that I want to, and then some, right? So there's kind of a halo of very, very faint, maybe cream color that didn't get erased, but that's okay. Under erasing is better than over erasing. Now I'll go in and start replacing or erasing those areas one by one. See this part here, you notice, I'll do this part. You notice that this whole area is connected, and even with tolerance of 5, it erases it. So let me try a 3. It still does. This is as low as it goes, and it looks like that worked. But another thing you can do, instead of using a tolerance of 1 and clicking on every single pixel, is keep it at a 5. And I'm going to use the lasso tool here. I'll just use the lasso. You can use magnetic lasso too. And just kind of outline the area that you want to protect, or outline the area you want to erase. And click delete. It will erase that part. And then use the background tool to finish off the rest. You notice there's some speckles of noise or dust here. Just don't worry about it for now. I'm just going through the silhouette of the jaguar and cleaning off the residue white area around the outline. Be careful here with the whisker. Let's see if a 5 still works. I think maybe I need a lower tolerance here. Let's do a 3. That's better. And down here. Whoa, you see here when I try to select the area under detail, it erased, oh, actually, yeah, it erased parts of this as well. And just imagine when it actually prints out, this area will be white. If that's okay with you, and that is okay with me, it's fine. Oh, I guess it didn't erase this time. So I'm not too worried about fixing this part. I mainly want to make sure that when the Jaguar is printed out as a print, there's not a halo of like a light gray or cream color around it. So with my eraser, my signature, I like to, since I'm selling this as a print, I like to erase. So here I've used the eraser tool. I need to bring up the opacity to 100 again. Opacity just means how strong the eraser is. I'm just gonna erase my signature because I usually replace it with another signature that's more consistent across all of my art prints. And so up here, notice little bumps here, right? If I zoom out, said, well, does this bother me? Do I want to keep it as is? This is more of a loose watercolor, so maybe it doesn't bother me and I'll leave it. But just for the sake of this tutorial, let's say I do want to shave it down a bit. I'm still in the eraser tool. I'm going to select the eraser tip with the soft edges. And I'll change the opacity down to 60 so it's not so blunt and aggressive. And I'm just going to shave down the bumps a bit. That way it looks more like a watercolor wash than an accidental bump. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. And all this pixel from the transparent background is kind of making me dizzy and it's hard to see, right? So this next step is key for me to really finish off this step, which is I'm going to start a new layer. We'll just say white background. And make sure this layer down here under layers, make sure this layer is beneath the Jaguar. And I'm going to fill this layer with a dark color. So let's do a dark gray color. See, as soon as I fill it, let me just do this again. As soon as I fill it, you see all of this dust here. And some of them show up in the print, some of them don't, but just to cover all my bases, I'm going to erase all of it. Now, there's a couple of ways to do that. If this looks manageable for you to erase manually, go ahead and do that. So I went back to the eraser tool. I'm going to set the opacity back up to 100 and I'm going to select a blunt eraser and I'll just go in and erase. See that border that I just cleaned up? I didn't notice it before, but once you change the background to a dark background, you see all of this stuff. See, this process is not, this process is pretty fast, right? I'm able to get this done in about 10 seconds. Well, at least 90% of it. So maybe it takes a minute. If it's something near the main subject, that I want to change it back to a blunt, to a softer edge. And you can play around with opacity and flow. So for here, I'll change the flow to 70. To keep it soft. Go back up to 100. Oops. Good. I think I got most of it. Oops. Okay, so you get the idea. Move the background. So that's one way to do it. And once that's done, you can change the background color. So use the paint bucket tool or G. Change the color to white. And ta-da! Now you can rest assured that this is going to be a Jaguar on true white background. And you can erase the background layer if you like. At this point, I don't think we're going to mess up too much. And since this is a TIFF file, it means that it will retain all the layers. So I like to just keep the layers separate. Just sometimes I can use the image itself without the white background for something else, like if you want to make it into a sticker or I don't know, something. In that case, you don't want to have to go through the cleaning process all over again just to erase the white background. So I'll keep them as separate layers. So that's one way to do it. And another way to clean it up is to use the quick selection tool. I'll walk you through that first and tell you kind of when it's easier to use the other method versus this one. So I'll first start a new layer, just like before, and place it below the Jaguar. I will color a dark color once again, just so we can paint it a different color, just so we can see better. And go back to selecting the Jaguar layer again, and you'll want to go to Select, Subject, and give it a couple seconds. You'll notice that it's automatically start to highlight the Jaguar itself. And of course, this works better if you have a single or multiple subject that are kind of next to each other. So it will look for content automatically. That's one of the beauty of Photoshop. And next, I want to go to Select and Inverse, so that instead of selecting the Jaguar, it's selecting everything else on this canvas. And the easiest way is to just click Delete. It will erase everything. But as you might have guessed, the quick selection tool isn't perfect. So sometimes it catches things like it does with the background eraser. Even with a low tolerance, I'm at 5 tolerance right now. If I want to set it to 3, it's still not quite there, so quite what I wanted. So what I can do is, so right now we're selecting everything in the background, right? So I'll go back to inverse again, so it's selecting the Jaguar. So now it's asking you, hey, is this everything that you want protected before I click delete? No, it's not. So go back to, so now you want to select the quick selection tool. You can use the W or just go to the left panel here about 4th way down, quick selection tool. And I already noticed here this tail has an area I want to protect, so I'll just click on an area and it will drag the dotted, the dashed line out more so that it's protecting more areas. And for a quick selection tool, just make sure on the top nav you are using the addition feature right now, not the subtraction. Subtraction will take away. Addition will add to what the quick selection tool already selected. I'll go around here. There's a little bit right here, maybe right here. There's the paw here. So my watercolor is pretty soft, especially around the edges, and it can the quick selection tool can be a bit too aggressive. So like I said, depends on what your subject, your art looks like. This might not be faster than the previous one that I showed you, because you have to be more meticulous about not over erasing. Okay, so that looks good. Go to inverse again, delete, and now you see that the tail and the paw area are protected. And I can still go in and so I'll cancel and erase my signature again. And ta-da! This is all set. Also, if you're painting a lot of flowers in watercolor, the quick selection tool might miss a lot of different soft spots on the flowers. Like if you're painting a whole motif that takes over most of the paper, then you have to repeat that step over and over again across the board to select everything you want to protect, versus if you use the other option, which is turning the background gray and just manually erasing, there might not be as many stain or dust to remove that way without having to use the quick selection tool. Now this is done. We'll paint it white and erase the background, and there you go. Both get you to this clean state of this Jaguar, and it's ready to print. Make sure you save it. Because it's a TIFF file, it will retain the layers if you don't merge them. You can if you want, but if you think, I like to keep them separate just in case I want to use the Jaguar by itself in the transparent file as to print on a sticker or whatever I can think of, or to combine with another image. So I don't want to waste all that work I just did. So I always keep them in separate layers. And that's done for the cleanup part. Just the last thing, if you want to adjust the image, the subject itself, you can go to adjustment. If I want to brighten up a bit, I can. Contrast. The levels. If I want to make it more faint. There's all these things I can tinker with. For my work, I don't tinker with it that much. Sometimes I may want to make certain areas more vibrant, in which case I don't use the overall adjustment here. I'll actually go over here to the left again, below the paint bucket, sorry, two below where it says sponge tool. Sponge tool allows you to adjust the saturation of certain areas on a painting. So selecting the sponge tool, the mode can be desaturate or saturate. I'm going to use saturate here. Using a soft sponge, that's okay. Flow 20, use a 10. 20 is pretty strong in my opinion for watercolor. And let's see, nothing's happening because I selected the wrong layer. So I need to select the Jaguar layer. And let's see, I want the hip area to be more saturated. So I'll go in and treat it that way. See, this is before I apply the saturation. This is after. This will just give me high level of control over spot treatment versus this adjustment here that you have to change, adjust a whole image. So I don't want this more saturated, but maybe I want this gray spot to be more saturated. I want it to pop more. Maybe I want these areas of blue to pop more, or the eyes of the Jaguar to be brighter. That could be cool. You can also desaturate if I want this area, this part here that started off pretty bright, vibrant, to be less so. You can also use the dodge tool to lighten up certain areas I said, the spot treatment to me is a lot more powerful than the overall adjustments. And the burn tool is darkening. So dodge is lighten, burn is darken, and sponge is adjusting saturation, desaturation. And those three I use more often, as well as the paint, eraser, and lasso tool. Now there's one last thing I want to show you that I often do to close out my watercolor cleanup. Sometimes I may not want my pencil marks to show in my final prints. I do make a rough pencil sketch with my paintings, and sometimes it's hard to erase them completely, so I want to clean it up, like you see right here and right here. So this is where I use the clone tool, the stamp icon here, or pressing S. And I'll make the brush size a little bit bigger. You can adjust the size right here, or on the Mac I press Alt Control and kind of move my finger along the mouse pad left and right to enlarge or make it smaller. So this is about a good size. And with the clone tool, I'm going to press Alt to determine an area I want to copy from. So basically I want this area to look like this. Press Alt, click, let go, and move over to the area that I want to cover. And here I'll press the mouse down. So the cross sign, you see the plus sign is where the area I'm borrowing the color from. And I'm covering it with, I will be covering this new area where the sketch is. Same thing here, pressing Alt to borrow, and here to paste. Let's see if there's anything else here. There's a little bit here. Usually don't mind the small areas, but let's say I do. I'll borrow the top part right here and move over. This will get easier and you'll be able to do it faster. If this is your first time using the clone tool, it takes a little bit to get used to, but it is pretty magical. And this is how the Photoshop experts and magazines give, the supermodels flawless skin and tiny waist and that thigh gap, which makes the rest of the world insecure and go on crazy diets and surgeries, but I digress. So I'm going along and cleaning up. It doesn't have to be pencil mark, obviously. You could just, let's say if I don't want this spot right here, make the brush size a little bigger and cover it with the clone tool. Oops. So it's pretty sensitive what size brush you should use, and it's even a trial and error for me. So like this, and you get the idea. So what did you think? Was that too hard, too easy? Did I overcomplicate things? Like I said, these are my way of doing things, giving you more options than I usually use for a single painting so that you can decide what works for your type of art and your Photoshop habits. Let me know in the comments below, and I appreciate you for watching and or subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video.